Immigration controversy exposes Donald Trump's lies and MAGA's racist underbelly. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe and let's briefly talk about this. So, we know from Donald Trump's campaign that Donald Trump spoke quite often about mass deportations and quite often about the illegals coming in from the southern border and how they are murderers and rapists, and they are causing, our American resources to be diluted and also taking up American jobs. So that was sort of Donald's position on immigration. It never came up that there are different categories of immigrants who live in the United States. There are those immigrants who come by H-1B visas, which is highly skilled labor in high-tech sectors or in places like medicine and engineering, whether it be computer engineering or mechanical engineering. We have seen the United States do this before. In the 1970s, the United States opened up its immigration policy based on these genius visas, and there was a flood of immigration from India into the United States. And now, about 50 years later, we are seeing the Indian American population taking form and becoming sort of an identity in and of itself. And by making this progress, if you see, and not just Indian, but also Asian progress in the United States, has made Donald Trump's general MAGA base quite uncomfortable, because they are looking at the phenotypical immigration, like people who don't look like us, who don't have our culture, our whatever that may be, for a new country, relatively new country like the United States compared to other parts of the world like India and the Middle East and Europe. And you have immigrants coming into our country through legal means, are being invited into our country by the government because of their expertise. Then we have people who come in as part of those now citizens of the country who provide critical infrastructural jobs, and that job demography simply doesn't exist with white Americans or a certain level of education of Americans that, you would think that MAGA's base does not have in large part. And so they look at the phenotypical immigration, which is, at the end of it, it is racism and xenophobia. But then you have this controversy, this fracturing happening between Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and the MAGA base. The MAGA base, which is anti-immigration in a blanketed way. Whereas Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and now Donald Trump, they favor the H-1B visas that bring in highly skilled people from all over the world to work in the United States. Now, they may come from India, they may come from South Korea, they may come from Hungary, they may come from England, they may come from Chile, they may come from Australia or New Zealand, wherever that is. When the phenotypical racist part of it is not there, you don't see any pushback. But when you talk about Indian computer scientists coming in, and that becomes sort of the calling cry of the MAGA base, then you see that a huge chunk of Donald Trump's cohort his voter base were just blindly racist. They're phenotypically racist. They're not merit based in any way. And while we know it, by context that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are both some way race superiorists. Like they look at and when you look at that, it's really impossible to look at not to look at merit at all. And so it becomes very difficult for these people to say no high skilled people of other skin colors are okay. They're part of our superior race culture. What we are talking about, so what Donald Trump didn't differentiate was between the low skilled labor workers who come here and work in the farms, who have lived in our country for years and years and years and decades and have built families here, whose children are American citizens by birth, who are still undocumented because they just didn't have the time or the opportunity to be able to be taken into consideration as an integral part of the American workforce. They work at jobs that don't pay as much. They work at jobs that Americans won't take. And that is a demography that Donald Trump and his border czar, Mr. Homan, are going against. They're going for these people. So they fall into the criminals and rapists coming in from the southern border. And then you have Donald Trump going after legal immigrants during the campaign in Springfield, Ohio. Then you have Stephen Miller talk about denaturalization, and you have Mr. Homan talk about, oh, we will deport whole families. There's no need to have the whole child separation policies. And the children who are born here would have to decide whether they want to live in the United States because they're Americans by birth, or whether to be deported along with their families, with their parents, because their parents are undocumented. That's a whole different category than the criminals and rapists that Donald Trump is talking about. And no one's discounting the threat of criminals coming into the United States, but a vast number of immigrants are not criminals. Asylum seekers are not criminals. People who come in with legal work visas, whether it be H-1B visas or other work visas, are not criminals. They shouldn't be deported, because if they are, they will take with them the labor force that runs America all the way from skilled labor to farm labor. Highly skilled tech jobs to farm jobs. Jobs that, for whatever reason, MAGA's base is not prepared to do. Either it's too beneath them and doesn't pay enough, or it is above the level of education that they have chosen to follow. If they had chosen to work in the highly specialized job market, then they should apply for these jobs or find training for these jobs. But this huge controversy now about this immigration policy of Donald Trump is the ambiguity of it, is the instability of it. You're seeing universities like NYU telling their foreign international students to come back before January 20th. So at least at least they're here and they won't be stopped at the immigration place and cause a whole lot of problems, because there are a lot of people who are now out of the country for the holidays, who are part of these work visas. When Donald Trump's administration comes in, we don't know what will happen. That uncertainty is what causes markets to go up and down and be volatile and unstable. That uncertainty puts so many people who work for America for American good, for the betterment of us, by doing something that is as required as picking vegetables and fruit, and doing something as specialized and high skilled as coming up with the most advanced superconductors and microchips, and going into nanotechnology and whatever else that highly skilled AI labor force would do. I don't know what that is, but it's beyond my expertise. I'm more than happy to accept that, but that doesn't make me any less of an American citizen, you know. So my plea to you now is to expose this underbelly, this racist underbelly, this phenotypical racism versus this meritocracy where there is racism, because we know that, you know, Elon Musk says and does racist things constantly, and so does Donald Trump. But like inviting Nick Fuentes to dinner with him. Nick Fuentes recently said, you know, I don't have a problem with high skilled labor coming in. I just don't want our country to look like India. I mean, that sort of ignorance is what Donald Trump has encouraged. And now that it comes time for the reality to sink in, that we're going to lose half our labor force when it comes to food production if Donald Trump implements mass deportations like Mr. Holman has promised, and if Donald Trump decides to make immigration more difficult for highly skilled labor and not give either that highly skilled labor, tech labor, or the farm labor any sort of pathway to citizenship, that's going to cause less and less people to want to come to the US. Yeah, that'll be a short-term win. We have stopped deportation, but who is going to do the jobs that Americans are either not qualified to do or they don't want to do because the pay isn't enough? So we as Americans have to ask those questions. Donald Trump has already gone back on his promise of bringing down the cost of living. He said, you know, with inflation, when it goes up once, it's very difficult to bring it back down again. So he's already gone back, and I've never seen a non-reaction to something like this before, where a president has a main campaign promise of bringing down inflation, and then after he wins, within a week or so, he says, before even getting into office, he says that doing what he had promised to do would be difficult to do. Not saying that impossible, but it would be difficult. You know, it's not his first priority. And we are seeing his first priorities being building an oligarchy and creating chaos amongst his own, while taking in millions of dollars from people who he then appoints as ambassadors and to various other nominations in the government and in other places like Voice of America, where the government has some stake. And so we're seeing Donald Trump do these very open things that would otherwise be looked at as, wait, is that a bribe? Is that not? And he is throwing in so many different distractions about, you know, taking over Greenland and Panama and making Canada the 51st state, and now this immigration controversy where he's letting this fight brew and let it sort of, you know, get hot and let it become the front page topic, so we don't pay as much attention to the nominations and the disaster that is headed our way in less than a month. So call your senators. I can't stress this enough, whether Democratic or Republican. If they're Republican, push them to vet these nominees, and specifically push them to reject Hegseth, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK Jr. because they pose threats to public health and national security. And those are complete rejections. Send the other ones to complete vetting, background checks, And if you have Democratic senators, tell them to push their Republican colleagues to do the same as you are calling them to do. Call Majority Leader to be John Thune and in his various offices, but specifically in the Washington office, and tell him that we need to look at these nominations, we need to vet them, and these are the ones we need to reject. The 4 that I just said. That is the core thing that's coming in our direction. This controversy shows MAGA's racist underbelly, that there is a base that bases its whole ideology on hatred of what they don't understand or fear of what they don't understand. And that's something that our country has to accept and grapple with. And I have to accept and give up on that hope that, racism isn't at the core of it. Well, yeah, a big chunk of my country is racist towards me, towards people who look like me. And I have to accept that. And then I have to move forward and make sure that that sort of racism is not what conquers my country. And that sort of racism is cleared up by education, by people getting access to true information and not disinformation and muddied waters, which is what Donald Trump did during his campaign, and that's what he's doing now. So people, please pay attention. Pay attention to what's coming and call out the distractions for the things that they are. Racism or distraction from imperialism, with isolationism, are all distraction from the oligarchical autocracy coming our way. Pay attention.